Monday, October 9th edition of As Goes Wisconsin. Greg Buck is producing. Joining me as guest host for this first hour is our friend and colleague Todd Allbaugh from the Todd Allbaugh Show, which you can hear every Monday through Friday across the Civic Media Network from 1 to 3 p.m. And we also want to wish everyone a happy Indigenous Peoples Day, used to be called Columbus Day. Good morning, Todd. How you doing?
I am absolutely fantastic, you guys. How about yourselves?
It's just so different from when we had you on last week because you were on your patio
I
in the
know, right?
great 80-degree weather, and now this is a little bit more normal Wisconsin fall.
Yeah, had to move inside into the kitchen area here. So hanging out with you guys is the best way to start my Monday.
Well, that's lovely of you to join us. I really appreciate it. We are going to start with the unbelievable atrocities that happened overseas this weekend when Israel was attacked by Hamas. And what is the death toll up to now? Do we know?
I think well over 300 in Israel and over 200 in parts of Palestine. So yeah, I mean, I watched a news show this morning. I think it was CBS Mornings. One of the people that are there, they brought in, equated this to 7/9/11s for Israel. Because if you take the amount of people who live in Israel compared to the U.S. and the amount of people who have died, and so the person was, I think it drove home the point. Imagine 7/9/11s and then having the attackers occupying your country and then kidnapping people, and now reports of rape as well. And it's certainly noteworthy that it is reported that Americans are also amongst the dead and the kidnapped.
Yeah. I started seeing that this morning. I think the report was I saw that 7 Americans were confirmed dead. We will keep up on that and see what happens with those numbers tragically, because unfortunately I think it's fair to assume that the number is going to rise. Now,
Yeah.
this happens, of course, at the same time that we have no Speaker of the House in Washington, D.C. And now there is a Republican from California, John Duarte, who was on Fox this morning, and he is calling for bipartisan agreement to get Kevin McCarthy back in.
Well, I mean that's a wonderful thought, I guess, but the train has kind of left the station on that. I just I don't think Kevin McCarthy would want to be speaker again, especially under these circumstances. And I mean, if they want actual bipartisan agreement, last time I checked, Hakeem Jeffries is sitting there with experience, and if they wanted bipartisan agreement, they could make Hakeem Jeffries the temporary speaker. Heck, they could make McHenry, who's actually the interim speaker. They can make him the official speaker. I mean, there are certainly other options there besides Kevin McCarthy.
Well, and I have to laugh. This was in WPR from last week. This is from Friday. Republican Glenn Grothmann of Wisconsin, who I rarely agree with about anything, actually came forward and said, yeah, there was no plan when they ousted Speaker McCarthy.
I saw that clip and I thought it was fascinating. And like you, Jane, I know Glenn fairly well. He served, and my former boss served in the Senate. And yes, I rarely agree with him politically. But yeah, I mean, Glenn makes a lot of sense on this one. That just, and again, think of this, Jane and Greg. When you're right of Glenn Grothman, you've really fallen off the cliff, right?
I
I
was
mean,
going to
even
say,
even Glenn Grothman has the sensibility to say, "Hey, guys, gals, if there is no plan, maybe we should keep the person we've got."
yeah, it's again, Glenn Grothman is saying this, and we're agreeing. It's astonishing. He told the WPR's The Morning Show last Friday he believes the vote to oust Kevin McCarthy was solely due to a personal conflict between the members of Congress. Quote, nobody in Washington believes that Matt Gaetz is doing this because McCarthy talked to Democrats. He's doing it because he, on a personal level, does not like Kevin McCarthy. And so
Yeah,
now
I mean,
everything's at a standstill, right? I mean, everything is
yeah, no,
stuck.
yeah, absolutely. It's a terrible position. Sorry, Greg, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
Yeah, I
I
agree.
was just gonna say, yeah, Glenn, we know.
Tell us something we don't know, right? And then at the same time, when all of this is going on, the office of Senator Tommy Tuberville, who claims he's a Republican from Alabama, even though most of the reports say that he actually lives in Florida, He's still not backing down, rather, on his month-long blockade on hundreds of military promotions, even amid these deadly attacks by Hamas against Israel. I just, and this is over the ability of female service people to go to a state where they can get medical care if they need an abortion. And he
Right.
is holding up, what, over 300 people? Over
Oh
300
well.
military promotions?
At least that. I mean, I think if you total not just the flag officers, but right down the line, it's well over 500 to 700 now total promotions. If you go right down the line, that I mean, it might be 200 to 300 of direct Senate appointees, but you go down the line. And we talked to General May, Brigadier General May, who is the commander of the Wisconsin Air National Guard, a couple months ago when we did a show up there. And of course, current city military are reticent. They cannot be partisan. They have to be nonpartisan. But he spoke directly to the military preparedness. And he went on the record and said, look, take the politics out, but I can't deny this is having real effects, even right here in Wisconsin, on our military men and women. So, yeah, I mean, the thing is, about Senator Tuberville, he might want to remove that license plate surround thing that says, welcome to the Sunshine State. So, I mean he turns out he does live in Florida, but he tries to represent Alabama. But, and our colleague Matt Flynn has talked about this in the afternoon as well, that, again, the responsibility falls on the Republicans in Tuberville, but not one, to my knowledge, yet not one United States senator has stood up and said, look, let's just change the rules. Let's forget about this, groveling to one person, because this is having a real effect on our... To me, Jane and Greg, they're kind of two facets. There's the strict military facet. I never served. I worked in military affairs when I worked in Congress, so I have some semblance, but I've never worked in it. I want to make that clear. But there is a real, not just from military preparedness, from strategy or strategizing, but the men and women who have kids.
Right.
They have kids going to elementary, high school, colleges, and they can't enroll because they don't know where they're going. That's kind of number one. Number two is what's happening in Israel right now with this attack by Hamas. And look, Israel is a top ally of the United States. President Biden has sent the USS Gerald R. Ford, the brand new nuclear aircraft carrier, to the region to try to dissuade others from taking advantage of this. We need our top military people in place to give commands and give orders, and Tommy Tuberville and the Republicans are holding that up.
And for what purpose? I just don't understand. He's making a one-man stand, and ultimately, of course, again, he doesn't live in the state where he claims to serve in Alabama, but there are a whole bunch of military people in Alabama, and I would think that they would become growingly annoyed with this action by him.
We've used a couple of stories. Alabamans, he is now, in political terms in polling, we call it underwater. Tommy Tuberville is underwater in his own state amongst Republicans over this. So yes, even Alabama Republicans say enough is enough. And yes, it would be bad enough if it was just about, women's health care rights in the military. But it's even more petulant than that. A large part is because President Biden decided to put the new Space Force headquarters in Colorado rather than Alabama. Because, hey, you know what? Alabama already has military, and I believe NASA installations as well. They tried to spread the love around. Tommy Tuberville didn't want it, and still he's throwing a fit.
844-967-2789. 844-967-2789. If you want to weigh in on this, you can call and or text. We have our friend Bill from Economwalk on the line. Good morning, Bill. What do you think about what's going on? Go ahead, Bill. We lost him.
As Johnny Carson would
I got
say,
him. I got him on air.
All right. We will delay that. Bill, you can always text in. Again, that number is 844-967-2789. We have a text from the 541 that says, so wait, actual Republicans are realizing they let MAGA publicans go too far and they don't have a plan? It's about time.
I mean, welcome to the party.
It's just, it's so immensely frustrating that all these personal petty grievances are how we have decided to govern when they are serious, serious problems to deal with in this country and around the world. and we're playing petty politics. And at least up to this point, they're all getting away with it.
Yeah, it really is like kindergarten cop, right? I mean, what the heck is going on?
Nothing. And it's so painful to see some of the discussions on Twitter. I am not well versed in the history of the conflict between Israel and Palestine. I certainly know some of it, but even one of the Israeli defense ministers this morning, and the attack that Hamas carried out was horrific and
Yeah.
awful and targeting civilians. But now the Israeli side has said that, well, we're dealing with human animals, and
And
that demonization of our humanness is terrifying to me.
well, it is, but I also think, Jane, in fairness, we're seeing that same type of human animalist genocide happening in Ukraine. I mean, you can't call what Putin is doing to Ukrainians anything short of genocide. I'm not going to go that far with Hamas right now, but certainly they're again. I never served, but there are actually rules of war. There are actually rules of engagement. And Hamas has broken those. They are a recognized terrorist organization by the United States of America. They are recognized terrorist organizations by most democracies and established countries around the world. And in war, you just don't do what Hamas is doing right now in Israel.
844-967-2789, 844-96-PARTY if you want to text and or call in. Join us. You're listening to As Wisconsin. We are on the Civic Media Radio Network. Jane Metnair in for Kristen Dry, who's on maternity leave. Todd Allbaugh is my guest host this hour. Greg Bach, the one and only, is on the board today, and we're talking about the just horrific attack by Hamas against Israel over the weekend. Greg Bach, you checked, and the death toll now is up to 1,300.
Correct.
If you want to check in on this, 844-967-2789. You can call and or text 844-96-PARTY, or you can text directly from the Civic Media app. Coming in from the 608. This iteration of the GOP can't lead on a sunny peacetime day. We're not prepared for a global conflict with the clown caucus having a stranglehold on Congress. Time for the adults in the room to take over. I mean, at this point in time, I feel fortunate that President Biden is our president just because he has decades of experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too, you guys. And by the way, is that better? Is my mic better now? Does it sound like I'm less in the bathroom?
Yes, much better. Much better.
All right, thank you. I to all the listeners. Here's a great example of Todd being an analog guy living in a digital world, because they give you like 500 different choosing things for a mic. And Corey, our chief engineer, texted me during the last segment. He goes, "Are you in the bathroom?" I said, "No, I'm not in the bathroom. I'm right here at my kitchen table."
There's a lot of,
but yeah,
there's always a lot of things going on behind the scenes that people aren't aware of.
Right.
Go ahead.
But yeah, I mean, appropriate. Maybe I am at the kitchen table, because to your point, Jane, this is a time where I think a lot of Americans are going to sit around and look at each other and say, let's get rid of all the political rhetoric and name calling and being in third grade. Here's an example of why experience matters. And the fact that Joe Biden has been a longtime member of the Senate, the fact that he is, I don't want to oversell it, but beyond political acquaintances, he has some sort of a friendship relationship with Bibi Netanyahu of Israel. And again, I have spoken out. I was not a fan of what the Netanyahu administration has been trying to do to change the judicial system in Israel. But I think this is a time to put that aside for a moment, because this was a blatant attack by Hamas, a terrorist organization, on Israel. And as you guys have pointed out, Israel is a key player, a key partner with the United States. And this is a region of the world that has been, unstable. I don't want to make a
For
joke
as long
about
as
it.
I can remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And Israel is the only democracy in that region. And it is imperative that the United States stand up and support them. It's imperative that the United States have an allegiance with them for strategic reasons beyond humanitarian reasons. And in order to make all that work and try to resolve this with the least amount of death, possible on both the Israeli and Palestinian side, I might add. I think it was earlier before you guys got on the air making the point that, look, there's a lot of innocent Palestinians right now. The Hamas MO is to use humans as shields. Again,
Yes.
they don't follow the rules of war. And so if you're the Israelis, you're like, well, do we just sit here as sitting ducks and let them keep firing at us without ever firing back? I think that the Israelis have tried to telegraph as much as they can. Hey, this is where we're going. Over in Gaza, these are where the targets. Please, if you're in this area, get out. Now, I understand the flip side of that is a lot of these people don't have other places to go. There's no good option here, quite frankly. But the fact is that the United States, in my personal opinion, has to stand with Israel. I applaud President Biden, and I don't even want to think about what would be happening right now if the previous administration were in control, or some of these people that are currently on the Republican ticket. And to your point, Jade, we're seeing exactly what happens in Congress. Republicans cannot govern. They can't anymore. And I mean, Liz Cheney said it best last week. If Jim Jordan becomes Speaker, Republicans have no right to stand and say they can protect democracy and the Constitution.
Don't you think that's how it's going to go, though? Don't you think that Jordan is going to be the one that they tap for this?
It appears that way right now. He has Trump's blessing, for whatever that means. And quite frankly, it does mean something in the Republican caucus right now. But I mean, there's a whole, I mean, they're saying that Trump may visit Washington tomorrow and saying that he'll be glad to take over on a short-term basis. I'm not sure whether that has realistic legs or not. I don't think so. But you know what? Every time we say it could never happen, look, something's happened. So, I mean, I can't say that it's a zero possibility that Trump becomes the interim speaker. I think Jordan probably has the inside track on the Freedom Caucus and the MAGA folks. So the question becomes, do what's left of any semblance of sanity in the Republican caucus, who's probably supporting Steve Scalise, which I'm not a fan of either. But I mean, do they do something historic? Are there 20 Republicans with a spine that actually believe in democracy and the Constitution that will cross over and vote with the Democrats to name Hakeem Jeffries or some other I mean, again, it's bizarro, but we live in a bizarro world. Arnold Schwarzenegger is making a big media tour this morning for a new book. What about Schwarzenegger? He is a Republican after all.
True.
I mean, and he's ineligible to move up the ladder because he's not. He's a naturalized citizen. So I mean, what about Schwarzenegger for a year and a couple of months?
That would be very interesting. It really would. 844-967-2789. We're up against the clock, but we're going to take Ken from Fond du Lac real quickly. Ken, good morning. What do you want to say?
Good morning. You think Biden giving Iran $6 billion was a good idea?
That's not what happens. The money is still in Qatar. That is a falsehood that's going around certainly on Twitter and in certainly right-wing spheres. President Biden did not give the Iranians $6 billion, which they used to give to Hamas. Thanks for calling, Ken. Just about a minute to go. 844-967-2789. 844-96-PARTY. We're going to switch gears a little bit when we come back. You're listening to As Goes Wisconsin on the Civic Media Radio Network. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. Jane Metner in for Kristen Bry. Greg Bach is on the board. Journeyman Journey fan. And Todd Allbaugh, Journeyman Talker, is my guest host for this first hour on our Monday. We were talking about the horrific attack by Hamas against Israel, and our caller had said, well, President Biden just gave Iran $6 billion. And a texter now says, please help me understand the $6 billion thing. So we're going to do that before we move on real quickly here. Fox News, national security correspondent Jennifer Griffin fact-check claims that President Biden's administration gave $6 billion to Iran during a prisoner exchange earlier in the summer. Some Republicans and right-wing pundits are claiming Iran used that money by the U.S. to help fund that deadly attack against Israel. Here is what Griffin pointed out during a fact segment on Fox News. The $6 billion is still currently held in a Qatari bank account with U.S. Treasury oversight. The money came from Iranian oil sales to South Korea, does not include U.S. taxpayer dollars. North Korean spokesperson Adrian Watson said in a statement, not a single cent from these funds have been spent. When it is spent, it can only be spent on things like food and medicine for the Iranian people. These funds have absolutely nothing to do with the horrific attacks today. This is not the time to spread disinformation. In fact, the U.S. has pre-positioned $2 billion worth of weapons stored in Israel, and I'm told the U.S. will likely release some of these pre-positioned weapons to help Israel in the coming days. So that was on Fox News.
Well said, Jane. Absolutely well said. And I mean, when Fox News is disputing this, it's unfortunate you have all this disinformation out there. I think it's also important for people to remember during the Trump administration, happened fairly early, so lots happened since then. But the Trump administration actually disclosed Israeli military secrets to Russia and to Putin, which did not sit real well in Tel Aviv, I might add. And you know, so if there's any sort of actual line of evidence here, is that during the Trump administration, they gave Israeli military information to Putin. Putin, of course, is very close with Iran, and Iran is funding Hamas. So, you know, if you want to talk facts, that would be it.
Yes, America's good buddy, Vladimir Putin.
Yeah.
Is good friends with Iran, and they are. And I saw something over the weekend that said that a member of Hamas was actually in Moscow in the last couple of weeks. So, yeah, don't forget who's buddies with who. Trust me, Moscow is not taking the side of Israel in this conflict.
No, not at all. And if I mean, not to go too far down the rabbit hole, or as they used to say, dueling tangents, but on the tangent side. But here's the deal, is that Putin certainly wants to distract attention and money away from the Ukrainian effort. What better way to do that than to start a conflict or help start a conflict in Israel, where they know the United States is going to give dollars and aid, and this is splitting the baby, so to speak, militarily, at a time. We've talked about this in our show, when Putin and his allies know that the American military is not, no offense to anybody in the military, but because of Tommy Tuberville and this lack of confirmed appointments, the U.S. military is not exactly on the firmest of ground either. It all adds up.
It really does. And it does not add up in a good way, unfortunately. All right, we are going to move on to a little bit earlier in the hour. We were talking about how, shockingly, we agree with Representative Glenn Grothmann from Wisconsin.
I don't like that.
I know. It's discombobulating. It's a good thing we're going to have Dan Schaefer on tomorrow to recombobulate us about all of this we agree thing. And yet now, Todd Allbaugh, after that man showed up last week at the state capitol armed, looking for Governor Evers, there appears to be more agreement this time at the Wisconsin state capitol. What's happening?
The lamb is laying down with the proverbial lion at the state capitol. And you know what? I uttered words on my show that I don't think that I have uttered since we began almost a year ago. Quote, I agree with Robin Voss and Governor Evers, as it turns out, because Tony Evers last week, and I applaud him as someone who worked in the Capitol, referred to as the building for those of us who worked there. Did you know that? Yeah.
I didn't.
Yeah,
it's just called the building.
The building. Yeah. Someone says, "Yeah, well, I worked at the building." I know, it's a thing.
Little insider stuff. Only the cool kids know that.
Jane just rolled her eyes at
cool
me.
kid stuff.
Yeah, she rolled her eyes at me like I was a frat boy on Breeze Terrace.
Well, Todd, I'm not exactly happy you said we agree with Robin Voss. So, I mean,
Well, here's the thing. And you know what? I think it's important to recognize when we do agree, at least I agree. And I applaud Governor Evers, because for those people who worked at the Capitol like I did, one of the great things is that anybody can come in and out. There's no fee for it. There's no metal detectors. You're able to come and go as you please. There's such great architecture. People could go up to the, well, most people would call it the second floor, but at the Capitol where you enter is called the ground floor. So
okay.
It's actually the first floor the governor's office is at. And so it represents open government to me. And I think Governor Evers said that in a much more eloquent way last Friday when asked by the press. And he said, I think he called it, if we put in metal detectors at the Capitol, it would be creepy, I think is what he said. Because he said, I've been to D.C. and it's creepy out there. It's
so like Oplander to say something like that.
Right, exactly.
It's creepy.
it's darn creepy. I mean, anyone who's ever been to DC, it's almost like LA traffic. You have to, what time's your appointment? All right, you got to pack on another half an hour, 45 minutes for the travel in, for all the taking your stuff out, putting your arms up, getting wanded, all that stuff. And honestly, I was taking a phone call just now, but I don't think the security needs to be, because the security did their job.
Exactly.
They took care of it, and
Right.
they did exactly what they needed to do. And I agree with Robin Voss.
I know. So to finish the story quickly, Robin Voss came out Friday, and he, of course, didn't give Tony Evers any credit, but he echoed the same words as Tony Evers and said, look, I don't think that we need to add more security or metal detectors or close down the Capitol either. And so, I agree that with Greg, that the Capitol Police and also the State Patrol did their job. Everybody was kept safe, and I would hate to see an overreaction to what appears to be, thankfully, a one-off with someone that has some mental health issues as well. And of course, but not every Republican is. God bless. At least there's still some wacky Republicans out there, because good old Chris Kapinga, the president of the Senate, came on I believe on the Milwaukee television over the weekend and said, "Well, I don't know about that. I think we need to start looking at locking down the building and putting in metal detectors." I mean, just a complete overreaction to appease the militant base of his party, I guess. I don't know.
844-967-2789, 844-96-PARTY. You can call and or text. Bill from Oconomowoc is on the line. Good morning, Bill. What do you think?
Great topics this morning. I'm actually calling about something you were talking about 20 minutes ago. With the war that Israel is in, if Fox News and all the far-right wings, either they're part of the problem or part of the solution. With Ukraine and Russia, they chose Russia over Ukraine. With what's going on in the Middle East right now with Israel, if they can't admit they're part of the problem, not part of the solution, then therefore Hamas, because they don't want to end this conflict in Israel. We've got to work together as a nation to support Israel. If this finger pointing they do is driving me out of my mind today on Fox News, who do they refer to? Former Trump advisors. Give me a break. The guy was the worst criminal we ever had in history, and they're using his team as advisors? You've got to be kidding me. So I like the way the conversation was going, and I don't know if I'll ever live long enough to say I agree with Robin Voss.
Well, it's a small thing, Bill. We got to start with the little things. He agrees that burning your house down is bad. So that there's a baseline, and maybe we can work up to more things from there.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for calling, Bill. Always appreciate it. 844-967-2789. Sharky from Racine is on the line. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. I take a real interest in Mr. Voss and his confidants. As a former retired police detective, in this situation, it may, in a sense, seem to be quite mundane issue in general, but I mean, they got the guy's first gun, then they got the guy's second gun. That whole thing with the first arrest to the second release, I'm concerned that, and I have pointed out to some of our lawmakers and people that are in Madison working, that I said, listen, I hope that the best investigators and the best interrogators are going to sit with this guy, and besides his potential mental illness, we have to dig through all that, making sure that it is only what it seems to be and not anything as a conspiracy, where we know that a big group in Madison they're resulting in all kinds of different things and desperations. I can only potentially think what could be been the situation here. I mean, society is doing a lot of dirty things in general just because people are short of funds or they have a purpose in life. But not to sound like a big conspiracist, but I'm concerned on this one because that was our governor. And I like Tony. I really do. But I'm worried about the individual that's in custody. And I hope that they pinched him real hard under interviews and potential interrogations.
Appreciate
you get my drift.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate your checking in, Sharky. 844-967-2789. I guess what I'm concerned about, and maybe I just missed it, Todd, but I did not see any Republican lawmakers in Wisconsin condemn this guy bringing the gun to the Capitol looking for the governor.
Yeah,
Is there any Was
Not
there
that I
anybody?
saw. I mean, again, well, I'll because I didn't take a poll, but so I don't know every single one. But no, I did not see anybody on any of the news feeds that I follow, and I think you and I follow quite a few to condemn this act. And I think the caller brings up a great point, especially as a former law enforcement officer. It is the governor of the United States, and again, as someone who worked at the Capitol, I talked about this a little bit on our show last week. There is, I didn't disclose it, but then I saw it like in multiple news stories over the weekend. So I'm like, all right, fine. So every legislative assembly and Senate office has a button under one of the desks. It's usually the chief of staff desk. Sometimes it's the receptionist desk. Every legislative office has an emergency button that is wired directly to the Capitol Police. So if you have someone come in your office where you don't feel safe, you simply discreetly push that under your desk, and then the Capitol Police show up. I guess there was one instance last year where someone pushed it and no one showed up. Certainly that should be reviewed. I agree, though, that we have to look at and make sure this was a one-off and not part of a larger plot of some sort. I mean, look what happened in Michigan, for goodness sake.
Yes.
Gretchen Whitmer was a target of kidnapping, and thank God that never happened.
But that's why, too, Carol Kane and I were talking about this on Friday. Words matter, and words are powerful. And if the wrong person hears the rhetoric that they believe encourages violence against elected officials, and unfortunately, sometimes I think those words are said intentionally for that reason, hoping that the right person's going to hear this and go, you know what, I'm going to take this into my own hands and I'm going to do something about it.
100%. Have to call out the violent rhetoric. It's certainly much more prevalent on the Republican side. I don't know any Democrats who are doing it, but I'll, for the record, say I don't agree with it on either side. But and Trump, it's not even a dog whistle anymore. I mean, he's saying these things right out. I mean, Mark Milley, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was on 60 Minutes last night with Norah O'Donnell and addressing the former president of the United States who called for his death, for goodness sake. So this is absolutely dangerous stuff. I think there needs to be an investigation. Who is this judge and the DA in Dane County that let this person off within hours and back out on the street? That can't happen either.
Yep, that's a good point. You are listening to As Goes Wisconsin. We've got a short break. We will be right back. Stay with us. We're on the Civic Media Radio Network. Welcome back to As Goes Wisconsin. Jane Van Mayer in for Kristen Bride. Greg Bach is on the board. Todd Allbaugh is my guest host for this first hour every Monday while Kristen is on maternity leave. So glad to have you here, Todd. We're going to change things up a little bit. I saw this story this morning and it just made me laugh. And I'm curious how people would react to this had it happened to you. Pink Floyd fans from the Daily Mail left furious after Roger Waters' gig at the London Palladium Theatre Sunday night, where he spent an hour reading from his unpublished autobiography instead of singing, and he even told them to F off. This seems like a bad way to deal with your fans.
Here's my number one question, you guys. Was it billed as Pink Floyd singing, or was it billed as an autobiography reading?
Oh, no, it was supposed to be a concert.
It was supposed to be Roger Waters' new reinterpretation of Dark Side of the Moon.
The entirety of the album.
Yeah, which, by the way, no one asks for. I stand... Here's the thing is, in this building, I can guarantee you I am the biggest Pink Floyd fan there is. I am a huge fan. There's no reason to be doing what he's doing. And he also said he was going to retire like 3 years ago, but then he was like, oh, this tour made me money. He's been going through some stuff in the media and the press with accusations of anti-Semitism.
Yes.
And I don't know if this is the final unraveling of a man who I thought unraveled in the early 80s.
The article says the former bassist for Pink Floyd spent an hour reading passages from his unpublished book from a laptop instead of devoting the evening to just playing the music as promised. Apparently, one of the stories he told was about his pet duck named Donald that he spent 20 minutes on, and fans were not happy.
I'm sure they weren't.
And if he's reading from his laptop, that's just a blog. You're just reading from a blog.
Right? Apparently, this is a quote. If you want to tell stories, tell them in your own time, to your own audience, in your own effing theater. By the way, if you can show constraint and stop shouting again. And Concert goers were checking in. I am so sorry to say tonight's concert was such a letdown. The actual songs were great, but the self-indulgent piece of crap was interminable, and finishing over 1 hour later than the timetable is inexcusable. Another ticket holder said when he sticks to his fantastic music, he's brilliant, but 60 minutes of music over 2.5 hours is barely a concert. The rambling nonsense ruined a wonderful last 50 minutes.
That
Yeah.
I would have demanded my money back.
I'm sure there are plenty of people who are going to be trying to do that. Whether or not that's going to be, if they're going to respond to that, I don't know. I've never had a concert experience that bad.
No, neither have I. I mean, I've seen bands who don't play well, but they played music from start to finish. It just was bad.
They didn't tell stories about
They were
their pet turtle.
By the way, now is the time I shall bring out my tome of life and start singing the passages of my duck named Donald.
What about you, Todd? Have you ever been to a show that just completely blew up?
No, not like. I mean, it does bring up a great question though. Like when you go to a live concert, what are you looking for? Like I mean, one of
Music?
the best. Well, I know, but I mean, I want the person, the artist I'm going to see, because I've been to some where it's like, well, it's pretty apparent they do a lot of cleanup, shall we say, with audio and computers. And then probably one of the best concerts I ever went to was here in Madison Overture, back in 2006. Tony Bennett, who just passed away recently. It was Tony Bennett, his pianist, a string bassist, and a drummer. And at one point he said, guys, take 5. And he stood downstage of the Overture and sang like 3 tunes a cappella, just Tony Bennett. And it sounded exactly like every album or every digital download I've ever listened to. And I'm like, see, that's talent. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the real deal when I go to a concert.
What? Go ahead, Greg.
Oh, I was going to say, I saw the Chicks, formerly the Dixie Chicks. I saw them in concert at the old Bradley Center years ago. And at one point, like playing through all these amazing hits from all over the years. And at one point they're like, we're going to change gears. And this huge vinyl tree dropped in the middle of the stage because it was in the round. And they played a 30-minute bluegrass set. And it was phenomenal.
I bet.
And
That's
honestly,
amazing.
had they been playing in a smaller venue, they could have just unplugged their instruments because they're playing so hard and so aggressively, and it was an amazing show.
Well, and I don't mind
Wow.
little, I guess one of the things I like about going to a concert is when they do share little anecdotes in between songs.
Sure.
And so, sure, Roger, you can tell me about your duck named Donald, but do it, for 2.5 minutes in between some other songs. Don't do a 20-minute dialogue on your duck.
Now do Corporal Clegg. All right, seriously, just play a song.
A little sprinkling here and there would probably have been a lot more palatable as opposed to spending the last 55 minutes of the show reading from his as yet unpublished autobiography.
But see, if he was smart or his publicist was smart, he could have had it both ways. He could have done a music set and then said, join me tomorrow night at whatever venue, and I'm going to do a reading off of my unauthorized biography. He probably could have made some bank, like, oh, I want to go see like the inside story or whatever. Shouldn't have done it together, in my opinion.
No, I think, at some point, he's been famous most of his life. He's 80 years old now. It just seems really, really self-indulgent to me. And one of these ticket holders said they paid £500 for those tickets. So that's
what?
that's
£500?
Oh,
£500.
when he came to Milwaukee a couple of years ago, the cheapest tickets were $175.
Wow.
Whoa.
And I was like, this is a guy who is in a band that's meant so much to me, and I can't do that. I'm not paying nearly $200 for the cheap seats.
Wow.
The cheap seats. And you would think that, didn't he save any money? For heaven's sakes, Roger, come on. You gotta. But I felt that way about the Eagles too when they were on their endless last tour and they were charging $400 for tickets. It's like, come on, Don, you never saved anything? Did you blow it all?
Jane, I feel like you would be the quintessential manager because you have that no nonsense attitude. You're a little bit of motherly, kind of caring about people. Just like but you just lay it down. Be like, come on, guys, get your act together.
Roger walks off stage and you're like, what did you do?
Go sit in the corner and think about what you've done. And I'm going to be back in 20 minutes and we're going to talk about this. Todd Allbaugh. Always wonderful having you join us on Monday.
You're fantastic, guys.
Hour. Thank you so very much. Stick around. Hour 2 of As Goes Wisconsin is on the way next, right after the top of the hour news. You're listening to the Civic Media Radio Network.